The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Braxton as Sergeant Sarah Martinez stepped out of the transport truck, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The military base stretched endlessly in all directions, a maze of concrete buildings and training fields that would become her new home. At 25, she had already proven herself in 2 combat deployments, but this assignment felt different. This was the elite sniper training program, where only the best of the best earned their place. Sarah had fought for this opportunity for 3 years. Every rejection letter, every condescending smile from superior officers, every whispered comment about women not belonging in precision shooting roles had only strengthened her resolve. She remembered the day her commanding officer in Afghanistan had watched her take out 3 enemy combatants at distances exceeding 800 meters with a standard infantry rifle. His surprised expression had been worth all the struggles that led to that moment. As she walked toward the administration building, Sarah noticed the curious stares from other soldiers. Word traveled fast on military bases, and she suspected her arrival had already become the subject of mess hall conversations. She was the first woman to be accepted into Fort Braxton's advanced sniper program in its 15-year history. The weight of that distinction pressed against her shoulders like an invisible pack. The registration process proved straightforward enough. A board clerk handed her a stack of forms and pointed toward a plastic chair. As Sarah filled out the paperwork, she overheard 2 sergeants discussing the upcoming training cycle. Their conversation stopped abruptly when they noticed her, replaced by awkward silence and meaningful glances. General Robert Hayes stood at his office window on the 3rd floor, watching the newest recruits process through the courtyard below. At 58, he commanded respect through decades of military excellence and an unwavering belief in traditional military values. His weathered face bore the marks of a career spent in the world's most dangerous places, and his reputation for producing elite snipers was legendary throughout the armed forces. The general's aide, Lieutenant Colonel James Webb, entered the office carrying a stack of personnel files. Webb had served under Hayes for 6 years and understood his commander's moods better than most. Today, the general seemed particularly focused on something outside his window. "Sir, the new class rosters are ready for your review," Webb said, placing the files on the mahogany desk. General Hayes turned from the window, his steel-gray eyes settling on the top file. "Tell me about Martinez," he said without preamble. Webb had anticipated this question. "Exceptional marksman, sir. 2 combat tour, multiple commendations. Her qualifying scores are actually higher than most of the men in her class." "Scores on a range are different from real-world performance," Hayes replied, flipping through Sarah's service record. "I've seen plenty of soldiers who could hit a bullseye but folded under pressure." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Major Patricia Collins entered, saluting crisply. Collins served as the base's training coordinator and had worked tirelessly to expand opportunities for female soldiers in combat roles. Her presence in Hayes's office regarding the new class was expected, but her determined expression suggested this would not be a routine briefing. "General, I wanted to discuss the training protocols for Sergeant Martinez," Collins began. Hayes set down the file and leaned back in his chair. "Major, she'll receive the same training as every other soldier in that program. No special treatment, no modifications to accommodate her presence." "That's exactly what I'm requesting, sir, but I'm concerned about potential bias from some of the instructors." The general's expression hardened. "Major Collins, my instructors are professionals. They don't care about gender, race, or any other factor except performance." Collins maintained her composure despite the general's stern tone. "Sir, with respect, Sergeant Martinez's success could open doors for other qualified women. This program's reputation means her performance will be scrutinized far beyond normal standards." General Hayes stood and walked to a wall covered with photographs of previous graduating classes. Hundreds of faces stared back at him, all men who had earned the right to wear the sniper badge. Each represented months of brutal training, countless hours of practice, and the mental toughness required to take a life from extraordinary distances. "Major, I've been running this program for 12 years, Hayes said without turning around. "Every soldier who has graduated has met the same standards. Those standards exist for a reason. In combat, there's no room for political correctness or social experiments." Webb shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had seen this argument play out in military circles countless times, and it rarely ended well for anyone involved. The tension between maintaining standards and adapting to changing military demographics created friction throughout all branches of the armed forces. "Sir," Collins replied carefully, "I'm not suggesting we lower standards. I'm simply asking that Sergeant Martinez be given a fair chance to meet them." The general finally turned around, his expression unreadable. "Fair chance? Major, she's here because someone higher up the chain of command decided this base would be an excellent testing ground for their diversity initiatives. I didn't request her, I didn't recruit her, and I certainly didn't lower our admission standards to accommodate her." The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of training exercises echoing through the windows. Webb had worked with General Hayes long enough to recognize when his commander was building toward a decision that would affect everyone involved. "However," Hayes continued, "since she's here, she'll get the same opportunity as every other soldier. No more, no less." Major Collins nodded, understanding this was likely the best outcome she could achieve in the current conversation. "Thank you, sir. That's all I'm asking." As Collins prepared to leave, General Hayes made a decision that would change everything. "Actually, Major, since you seem so confident in Martinez's abilities, let me propose something. If she can complete the final qualification course with the same standards we apply to everyone else, I'll personally recommend her for advanced training opportunities." Webb looked up from his files, sensing something significant in the general's tone. "And if she fails?" Collins asked. Hayes smiled for the first time during the conversation, but there was no warmth in his expression. "If she fails, it proves my point about why this program has worked so well without women for 15 years. The challenge hung in the air between them like smoke from a battlefield. Major Collins understood the implications immediately. Sarah Martinez's success or failure would impact not just her own career, but the future of women in elite military training programs across all branches of the armed forces. Outside, Sarah Martinez finished her paperwork and prepared to meet her new training cadre, unaware that her performance had already become the subject of a wager that would define her military future. The first week of training tested every soldier's resolve, but Sarah felt the additional pressure of 20 pairs of eyes watching her every move. The other recruits ranged from experienced infantry soldiers to Marines with specialized training backgrounds. Each brought years of combat experience and the confidence that came with surviving real-world operations. Sergeant First Class Michael Torres served as the primary instructor for the new class. A veteran of 4 deployments and holder of 3 Bronze Stars, Torres had built his reputation on transforming good soldiers into exceptional snipers. His training methods were legendary for their intensity, and his graduation rate spoke to his effectiveness. When he looked at Sarah during the first formation, his expression revealed nothing about his thoughts regarding the program's first female participant. "Welcome to hell," Torres announced to the assembled class. "For the next 16 weeks, your old life doesn't exist. Your comfort zone is gone. Your previous accomplishments mean nothing here. You will learn to think, breathe, and dream precision shooting, or you will fail." The morning physical training session pushed every soldier to their limits. Sarah had prepared for months, knowing her physical performance would be scrutinized more closely than anyone else's. As the class ran through the obstacle course, she maintained pace with the strongest performers while fighting the burning sensation in her lungs and legs. Private First Class Danny Rodriguez, a 22-year-old from Texas, found himself running beside Sarah during the final mile. Rodriguez had joined the program after 3 years as an infantry machine gunner, and his natural competitive instincts kicked in whenever he saw another soldier matching his performance. "You're keeping up pretty well for someone who's supposed to prove women don't belong here," Rodriguez said between labored breaths. Sarah glanced at him without breaking stride. "I'm not here to prove anything except that I can do the job." "Fair enough," Rodriguez replied. "Just so you know, Torres is going to push you harder than anyone else. It's not personal, it's just how this works." The warning proved accurate during the first marksmanship evaluation. Sarah approached the firing line with her assigned rifle, a precision weapon that would become her constant companion for the next 4 months. The targets stood at various distances, from 200 to 600 meters, with scoring requirements that eliminated most candidates during their first attempt. Torres walked behind each shooter, observing technique and making notes on his clipboard. When he reached Sarah's position, he stopped longer than usual, studying her breathing pattern and trigger discipline. The extra attention created additional pressure, but Sarah had learned long ago to use external stress as fuel for better performance. Her first shot struck the center ring at 200 meters. The second found its mark at 300 meters with precision that surprised several nearby shooters. As the targets extended to longer distances, Sarah's consistency remained solid while other soldiers began struggling with wind calculations and scope adjustments. Staff Sergeant Lisa Chen watched the exercise from the observation tower. As the only other woman assigned to the sniper training facility, Chen understood the unique pressures Sarah faced. Chen had fought her own battles to earn respect in the military intelligence field, and she recognized the determination in Sarah's movements. The first casualty came during Week 2. Private Johnson, a decorated soldier from the 82nd Airborne, failed to meet the minimum standards for precision shooting under stress conditions. His departure served as a sobering reminder that talent alone wasn't sufficient for this program. Sarah's progress continued steadily, but she noticed subtle changes in how others treated her. Some soldiers offered genuine respect based on her demonstrated abilities. Others seemed to resent her presence, viewing her success as somehow diminishing their own achievements. The social dynamics created an additional layer of complexity that male soldiers never had to navigate. During a particularly challenging exercise involving night shooting with thermal optics, Sarah found herself paired with Corporal James Mitchell, a former Army Ranger with extensive combat experience. Mitchell had initially expressed skepticism about women in combat roles, but Sarah's consistent performance had begun changing his perspective. "Martinez, you realize everyone's waiting for you to fail, right?" Mitchell said as they prepared their equipment for the evening session. "Some people maybe," Sarah replied while adjusting her scope, "but not everyone." Mitchell smiled for the first time since they had been introduced. "You know what? You're right. Tors actually mentioned that your fundamentals are better than half the guys who graduated last year." The night exercise tested skills that many soldiers found intimidating. Shooting in low-light conditions required different techniques and mental approaches than daytime training. Sarah had practiced these scenarios extensively during her preparation, understanding that any weakness would be magnified under scrutiny. As darkness settled over the range, targets became visible only through thermal imaging equipment. The challenge required shooters to engage multiple targets at varying distances while accounting for atmospheric conditions that changed throughout the night. Success demanded both technical proficiency and mental resilience under challenging circumstances. Sarah's first target appeared at 400 meters, barely visible as a heat signature against the cooler background. She controlled her breathing, calculated wind drift based on environmental indicators, and squeezed the trigger with steady pressure. The target dropped, confirming a successful hit. The exercise continued for 3 hours, with targets appearing randomly across the range. Sarah maintained her concentration despite fatigue and the pressure of performing under observation. Each successful engagement built confidence while demonstrating capabilities that couldn't be questioned. General Hayes observed the training from his office window, using binoculars to watch the muzzle flashes in the distance. Lieutenant Colonel Webb joined him, carrying the day's performance reports from various training exercises across the base. "Sir, the preliminary scores from tonight's exercise show Martinez ranking 3rd overall," Webb reported. Hayes lowered his binoculars and considered this information. 3rd place among 23 soldiers represented excellent performance by any standard. More importantly, it demonstrated consistency that many soldiers struggled to achieve under stress. "What about her peers? How are they responding to her presence?" Hayes asked. Webb consulted his notes from conversations with various instructors. "Mixed reactions, sir. Some soldiers respect her abilities. Others seem to be waiting for her to fail. Tors reports that she's requiring less individual attention than average for new students." The general nodded thoughtfully. His experience had taught him to evaluate soldiers based on performance rather than preconceived notions, but he also understood the importance of unit cohesion in combat situations. Sarah's success would need to include acceptance from her fellow soldiers to be meaningful in real-world applications. Back on the firing range, Sarah completed her final engagement of the evening with another successful hit. As she secured her equipment and prepared to return to the barracks, Tors approached her position. "Good work tonight, Martinez," the instructor said simply. The brief acknowledgement meant more to Sarah than elaborate praise would have from others. Tors didn't waste words on false encouragement, and his approval indicated genuine recognition of competent performance. As the soldiers walked back to the barracks, Sarah reflected on the progress she had made during her first 2 weeks. The challenges ahead would only increase in difficulty, but she had demonstrated that she belonged among these exceptional soldiers. The real tests, however, were yet to come. Month 2 brought challenges that separated the exceptional soldiers from the merely competent. The class had shrunk from 23 to 17 members as soldiers either failed to meet standards or requested transfers to other programs. Sarah watched each departure with mixed emotions, understanding that their struggles could easily have been her own under different circumstances. The training evolved beyond simple marksmanship to include complex mission planning, intelligence analysis, and psychological preparation for combat situations. Sarah discovered that her analytical background and attention to detail provided advantages in areas where pure shooting ability wasn't sufficient. During map reading exercises and tactical planning sessions, she consistently ranked among the top performers. Sergeant First Class Tors introduced urban warfare scenarios during Week 6. These exercises required soldiers to operate in simulated city environments with multiple variables affecting each shot. Buildings created wind shadows, glass windows altered ballistics, and civilian populations added ethical considerations that didn't exist on traditional firing ranges. Sarah found herself assigned to Corporal Eric Washington for a particularly challenging scenario involving hostage rescue. Washington, a former Marine with 3 combat deployments, had initially been skeptical about working with any new soldier, regardless of gender. However, Sarah's demonstrated competence had earned his grudging respect. "Martinez, this scenario is going to test everything you've learned," Washington explained as they studied the mock urban environment. "We've got simulated hostiles holding civilians in a 3-story building. Windows are bulletproof glass, which means we need perfect shot placement through ventilation openings." The challenge required precision that went beyond anything Sarah had previously attempted. Success demanded calculating not only distance and wind effects, but also the trajectory changes caused by shooting through small openings at acute angles. Failure meant simulated civilian casualties that would result in automatic course failure. Sarah spent 2 hours studying the target building, measuring angles with her scope, and calculating mathematical relationships between shooting positions and target windows. Her methodical approach drew attention from other soldiers, who typically relied more on instinct and experience than detailed preparation. When the exercise began, Sarah positioned herself on a rooftop 400 meters from the target building. The first shot required threading a bullet through a ventilation grate barely 8 inches wide, while accounting for wind that shifted direction every few minutes. She observed the target area for 30 minutes before taking her first shot. The bullet struck exactly where Sarah had calculated, eliminating the primary threat without endangering any civilians. Washington monitored the scenario through his spotting scope, providing confirmation and adjusting for the second target. Their teamwork developed naturally as the exercise progressed. "Second target northeast window, 3rd floor," Washington called out. "Small opening, maybe 6 inches, wind from the left at 8 miles per hour." Sarah made her calculations and adjusted her aim. The shot required precision that many experienced snipers would consider extremely difficult. She controlled her breathing, found her natural respiratory pause, and squeezed the trigger with gradual pressure that wouldn't disturb her aim. Another successful hit. The exercise continued for 40 minutes, with Sarah engaging 8 targets under varying conditions. Each shot demanded different calculations and techniques, testing her adaptability under pressure. When Tors finally called the exercise complete, Sarah had achieved perfect scores while several other teams struggled with the challenging requirements. General Hayes reviewed the exercise results in his office that evening, studying performance reports with unusual interest. Lieutenant Colonel Webb noticed his commander's focused attention on Sarah's scores, which had consistently ranked among the highest in every category. "Sir, Martinez's performance continues to exceed expectations," Webb observed. Hayes set down the reports and walked to his window. The base appeared peaceful in the evening light, but he knew that beyond these walls, real-world situations demanded the skills they were teaching. Political considerations aside, he needed soldiers who could perform when lives depended on their abilities. "Webb, what do the other students say about her?" Hayes asked. "Respect, sir. Even the soldiers who initially questioned her presence acknowledge her competence. Torres mentioned that she's becoming a preferred partner for difficult exercises." This information surprised Hayes more than the performance scores had. Peer acceptance often proved more challenging for exceptional soldiers than meeting technical standards. Sarah's ability to earn respect from experienced combat veterans suggested leadership potential that extended beyond marksmanship abilities. Meanwhile, Sarah faced a different kind of challenge in the barracks. The close quarters and constant interaction with male soldiers created social dynamics that required careful navigation. Most of her classmates had accepted her presence, but a few still harbored resentments that occasionally surfaced during informal conversations. Private First Class Rodriguez had become an unlikely ally, often deflecting inappropriate comments from soldiers who hadn't yet accepted Sarah's place in the program. During one particularly tense evening, Rodriguez confronted Specialist Davis, whose continued negativity was affecting group morale. "Davis, what's your problem with Martinez?" Rodriguez asked during a card game in the common area. Davis looked around the room, seeking support from other soldiers who avoided eye contact. "My problem is that this whole thing is political correctness gone wrong. We're supposed to pretend that physical differences don't matter." Sarah entered the common area during this exchange, immediately sensing the tension in the room. Several soldiers shifted uncomfortably, while others watched to see how the situation would develop. "Physical differences like what, Davis?" Sarah asked calmly. Davis hadn't expected her to engage directly. "You know what I mean. Upper body strength size, the ability to carry a wounded soldier out of combat." Sarah set down her equipment bag and faced Davis directly. "You're absolutely right about physical differences. I'm smaller than most of you, and I can't bench press as much weight. But this is sniper training, not power lifting. When did you last see a sniper carry someone out of combat?" The room fell silent as other soldiers considered her point. Sniper teams typically operated in two-person units, with emphasis on stealth and precision rather than physical strength. Sarah's question highlighted the disconnect between Davis's concerns and the actual requirements of their chosen specialty. Corporal Mitchell stood up from his bunk, adding his voice to the conversation. "Davis, she outshot you in every exercise this week. Maybe focus on your own performance instead of looking for excuses." The confrontation ended without escalating further, but Sarah understood that acceptance would remain an ongoing process. Some soldiers would judge her based on performance, while others would never move beyond their preconceived notions about women in combat roles. Training intensity increased during Week 8 with the introduction of extreme weather conditions. Sarah found herself shooting in simulated rain, snow, and high winds that tested equipment as much as human abilities. These exercises revealed weaknesses in soldiers who had performed well under ideal conditions. During a particularly challenging snow exercise, Sarah's rifle scope began fogging despite preventive measures. The condensation created visibility problems that could have meant mission failure in real-world situations. Rather than request equipment replacement, Sarah used techniques she had learned during cold weather training to clear the scope and continue the exercise. Her improvisation impressed Torres, who had been observing the exercise from a concealed position. The ability to adapt when equipment failed often determined success or failure in combat situations. Sarah's problem-solving approach demonstrated mental flexibility that couldn't be taught through standard instruction methods. As month 2 concluded, Sarah had established herself among the top performers in almost every category. Her shooting accuracy remained consistently high, her tactical knowledge showed steady improvement, and her ability to work effectively with different partners had earned respect from classmates who initially questioned her presence. General Hayes began to realize that his assumptions about women in combat roles might need reevaluation. Sarah's performance challenged traditional notions while maintaining the high standards that made his program successful. The final test, however, would determine whether her classroom success could translate to realistic combat scenarios that truly tested every aspect of sniper training. The third month introduced psychological warfare training that pushed soldiers beyond their comfort zones in ways that physical challenges never could. Sarah discovered that mental resilience required different strengths than marksmanship accuracy, and the emotional demands of simulated combat scenarios tested her resolve more than any previous exercise. Dr. Amanda Foster, the base psychologist, conducted sessions designed to prepare soldiers for the psychological impact of their chosen profession. These meetings forced participants to confront the reality of taking human lives at distance, often without knowing personal details about their targets. The sessions revealed that technical proficiency alone wasn't sufficient for long-term success in sniper operations. The hardest part isn't making the shot, Dr. Foster explained during one group session. It's living with the consequences afterward. Some soldiers discover they can't handle the psychological burden, regardless of their shooting abilities. Sarah found these discussions challenging in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her previous combat experience involved close-quarters situations where survival instincts overrode moral considerations. Sniper operations required deliberate decision-making that allowed more time for ethical reflection, creating different psychological pressures. During individual counseling sessions, Dr. Foster explored Sarah's motivations and mental preparation for the unique challenges of precision shooting. These conversations revealed a complexity of thought that impressed the experienced psychologist, who had evaluated hundreds of potential snipers during her career. "Sarah, what drives you to pursue this particular specialty?" Dr. Foster asked during their third meeting. "I want to be the best soldier I can be," Sarah replied. "This program represents the highest level of training available in my field." Dr. Foster made notes while considering Sarah's response. "That's a professional answer, but I'm interested in your personal motivations. Why is this achievement important to you specifically?" The question forced Sarah to examine motivations she hadn't fully explored. "I suppose I want to prove that gender doesn't determine capability, not to anyone else but to myself." "And what happens if you succeed? How will that change your perspective?" Sarah paused before answering. "Maybe it will help other women who want similar opportunities. But mainly, I'll know that I accomplished something difficult because I was willing to work for it." These psychological evaluations became part of each soldier's permanent record, influencing future assignments and advancement opportunities. Sarah's sessions revealed mental stability and moral clarity that impressed Dr. Foster, who recommended her for advanced training opportunities regardless of the program's final outcome. Meanwhile, field exercises increased in complexity and realism. Sarah found herself operating in simulated combat environments where split-second decisions had cascading consequences for entire missions. These scenarios tested leadership abilities as much as technical skills. During one particularly challenging exercise, Sarah was assigned as team leader for a mission involving multiple objectives across difficult terrain. Her team included Corporal Washington and Private First Class Rodriguez, both of whom had significantly more combat experience than she possessed. "Martinez, we've got 3 targets in separate locations," Washington briefed as they studied aerial photographs. "Time limit is 4 hours, and we can't be detected by opposing forces." The mission required coordinating movement across 6 miles of rough country while maintaining communication silence and avoiding enemy patrols. Success demanded tactical planning that balanced speed with stealth, ensuring each objective could be reached without compromising the overall mission. Sarah spent 30 minutes developing a route that utilized natural concealment while minimizing exposure to observation points. Her plan involved approaching targets in an order that seemed counterintuitive, but actually reduced total travel time by 20%. "We're going to hit the furthest target first," Sarah explained to her team. "It looks inefficient, but the ridge line provides concealment for most of our movement." Rodriguez studied the map with skepticism. "That's adding 2 miles to our route." "Initially, yes, but look at the sight lines from here to here," Sarah pointed out. "If we follow the direct route, we'll be exposed during 3 separate boundary crossings. My route keeps us hidden until the final approach." Washington nodded as he traced Sarah's proposed path. "She's right. The extra distance is worth the concealment advantage." The mission began before dawn, with Sarah's team moving through dense forest toward their first objective. Her route planning proved accurate as they avoided detection while making steady progress toward the target area. The additional distance actually provided strategic advantages that offset the time penalty. At the first target location, Sarah positioned her team for observation while calculating wind conditions and range estimates. The shot required precision at nearly 700 meters, complicated by shifting winds that changed direction every few minutes. "Target acquired," Sarah whispered into her radio. "Adult male, dark jacket, northeast corner of the building." She waited for wind conditions to stabilize before taking the shot. The bullet struck exactly where intended, confirming a successful engagement. The team immediately began movement toward their second objective, maintaining the schedule despite challenging terrain. Sergeant First Class Tours monitored the exercise from the command post, tracking multiple teams as they attempted the same mission with different approaches. Sarah's team was maintaining the fastest overall pace while avoiding detection by opposing forces that had already compromised two other teams. "Sir, Martinez's team just completed Objective 2, reported the exercise controller. "They're 40 minutes ahead of schedule." Tours studied the tracking display with interest. Leadership under pressure often revealed character traits that couldn't be evaluated through individual performance. Sarah's decision-making demonstrated tactical understanding that exceeded many soldiers with years more experience. The third objective presented the greatest challenge, requiring a shot through a narrow window at maximum range while accounting for multiple environmental factors. Sarah's calculations needed to be perfect, as there would be no opportunity for corrective shots without compromising the mission. She spent 20 minutes studying the target building, measuring wind indicators and calculating mathematical relationships between variables. Her methodical approach seemed slow to Rodriguez, who was accustomed to more intuitive shooting styles. "Martinez, we're running out of time," Rodriguez whispered. "Patience," Sarah replied. "This shot needs to be perfect on the first attempt." When she finally squeezed the trigger, the bullet traveled nearly 800 meters through shifting winds before striking the intended target. The successful engagement completed their mission with 15 minutes remaining, making Sarah's team the only group to accomplish all objectives within the time limit. General Hayes reviewed the exercise results with particular attention to leadership evaluations. Sarah's performance as team leader had impressed evaluators who typically focused on individual achievement rather than group coordination abilities. "Webb, look at these leadership scores," Hayes said, pointing to specific sections of the report. Lieutenant Colonel Webb examined the documents with surprise. "Sir, those are exceptional ratings. Most soldiers require years of experience before demonstrating this level of tactical leadership." The general found himself reconsidering assumptions he had held throughout his career. Sarah's success challenged traditional notions about combat effectiveness while maintaining the standards that made elite units successful. Her abilities extended beyond individual performance to include skills that enhanced overall team effectiveness. Dr. Foster submitted her psychological evaluation that same week, recommending Sarah for advanced training opportunities based on mental resilience and moral clarity. The assessment noted unusual maturity and decision-making abilities that suggested potential for leadership roles in elite military units. As month 3 concluded, Sarah had established herself as one of the program's most successful students. Her performance rankings placed her among the top 3 soldiers in almost every category, while peer evaluations indicated genuine respect from classmates who had initially questioned her presence. The final month would bring the ultimate test that determined graduation from the program. Success would validate everything Sarah had worked to achieve, while failure would confirm the doubts of those who believed women didn't belong in elite combat roles. The pressure was building toward a climax that would define her military career and potentially influence policy decisions, affecting thousands of future female soldiers. The final month arrived with an intensity that transformed the remaining 14 soldiers into focused weapons of precision. Sarah felt the weight of 16 weeks of preparation as she prepared for the ultimate evaluation that would determine her future in the military's most elite shooting program. The test ahead would challenge every skill she had developed while operating under pressure that exceeded anything she had previously experienced. General Hayes announced the final examination personally, addressing the assembled class in the main briefing room. His presence emphasized the significance of what lay ahead, and Sarah noticed the unusual tension in his voice as he outlined the requirements that would separate graduates from failures. Ladies and gentlemen, your final evaluation will simulate a real-world mission scenario, Hayes began. You will operate individually, with no support beyond what you carry. Success requires perfect execution under conditions designed to test your absolute limits. The general's eyes swept across the gathered soldiers, lingering momentarily on Sarah before continuing. This exercise has a 43% historical failure rate. Those who fail will be recycled to standard infantry roles. Those who succeed will join the ranks of the military's most elite precision shooters. Sarah absorbed this information while studying the faces of her classmates. 14 soldiers had survived to reach this point, each representing months of dedication and sacrifice. The knowledge that nearly half would fail created an atmosphere of barely controlled anxiety that affected everyone present. Sergeant First Class Tours distributed sealed envelopes containing individual mission parameters. Each soldier would face different challenges designed to test their particular strengths and weaknesses. Sarah's envelope felt heavier than the paper inside could possibly weigh, as though it contained the accumulated pressure of everyone who doubted her capabilities. "Martinez, Sarah E.," Tours called out as she approached to collect her materials. "Your test begins at 400 tomorrow. Report to Checkpoint Alpha with full field gear and your assigned weapon system." That evening, Sarah opened her mission envelope in the privacy of her quarters. The contents detailed a scenario that would test every aspect of her training while operating under the most challenging conditions the program could devise. She would have 24 hours to complete a series of precision shots at varying ranges while avoiding detection by opposing forces. The mission required her to infiltrate a designated area, establish multiple firing positions, and engage targets according to a specific timeline. Failure to complete any portion would result in automatic disqualification from the program. Success demanded not only technical proficiency, but also the mental resilience to perform under extreme pressure. Sarah spent hours studying topographical maps and aerial photographs of the test area. The terrain included dense forests, open meadows, and urban structures that would require different approaches and shooting techniques. Her route planning needed to account for multiple variables while maintaining the flexibility to adapt if circumstances changed. At 400, Sarah arrived at Checkpoint Alpha carrying 60 pounds of equipment that would sustain her throughout the evaluation. Tours conducted a final equipment inspection before releasing her into the test area with a reminder that radio communication was prohibited, except for emergency situations. The first target appeared at sunrise, requiring a shot at 400 meters through dense morning fog. Sarah had anticipated challenging weather conditions and positioned herself accordingly, using natural wind indicators to judge atmospheric effects on bullet trajectory. Her first shot found its mark despite visibility that limited observation to brief moments between fog banks. Moving to her second position required crossing open ground while avoiding detection by exercise controllers who would disqualify her if she was spotted. Sarah used terrain features and natural concealment to maintain stealth while covering 2 miles of difficult country within her allocated time frame. The second target demanded precision at 600 meters while accounting for crosswinds that shifted direction unpredictably. Sarah spent 30 minutes observing wind patterns before identifying a brief window of stable conditions. Her shot struck the designated target zone with accuracy that would have impressed her instructors under normal circumstances. General Hayes monitored the exercise from the observation post, tracking Sarah's progress through radio reports from scattered controllers throughout the test area. Her performance exceeded expectations as she maintained her timeline while demonstrating tactical awareness that impressed experienced evaluators. "Sir, Martinez just completed Engagement 3, reported the exercise controller. "Perfect hit at 700 meters in variable wind conditions." Hayes studied the tracking map that showed Sarah's route through the test area. Her movement patterns revealed careful planning and adaptability that demonstrated advanced tactical understanding. More importantly, she was maintaining her schedule despite increasingly difficult challenges. The fourth target presented Sarah's greatest challenge yet, a precision shot at 800 meters through a narrow gap between buildings while accounting for multiple environmental factors. The target zone measured only 12 inches in diameter, requiring accuracy that would test even experienced snipers. Sarah positioned herself on a hillside overlooking the target area, using her scope to study wind indicators and atmospheric conditions. The shot required mathematical calculations that would have challenged her instructors, and she spent an hour analyzing every variable that could affect bullet trajectory. Wind patterns proved particularly complex, with different air currents at various elevations, creating unpredictable effects on long-range precision. Sarah observed the area through multiple cycles before identifying consistent patterns that would allow accurate prediction of bullet path. When she finally took the shot, the bullet traveled through shifting air currents for nearly 2 seconds before striking within inches of the intended point. The successful engagement put her ahead of schedule for the first time since the exercise began, providing a buffer for the even more challenging targets ahead. Dr. Foster observed portions of the exercise from concealed positions, evaluating psychological factors that determined long-term success in sniper operations. Sarah's demeanor remained controlled throughout the exercise, demonstrating mental resilience that impressed the experienced psychologist. Her stress management is exceptional, Dr. Foster noted in her evaluation. Most soldiers show visible anxiety by the fourth engagement. Martinez appears to be using pressure as motivation rather than allowing it to degrade performance. The fifth target required Sarah to demonstrate urban warfare skills developed during month 2 of training. The scenario placed the target inside a building with multiple windows, requiring precise shot placement to avoid civilian casualties represented by training mannequins positioned throughout the structure. Sarah studied the building layout through her scope, identifying the specific window that provided the required shot angle while ensuring civilian safety. The calculation proved complex, as bullet trajectory needed to account for glass interference and the possibility of ricochets that could endanger innocent bystanders. Her shot shattered the window cleanly before striking the designated target, avoiding civilian areas by margins measured in inches. The precision required represented the highest level of urban sniper training, demonstrating skills that few soldiers ever mastered completely. As evening approached, Sarah prepared for her final and most challenging engagement. The target appeared at maximum range under low-light conditions that would test every aspect of her training. Success at this target would guarantee her graduation from the program, while failure would end her dreams of joining the military's elite precision shooters. The setup required a shot at nearly 1,000 meters as daylight faded toward darkness. Sarah would need to account not only for distance and environmental factors, but also for changing light conditions that affected target visibility and scope performance. The challenge represented the absolute pinnacle of sniper training. Sarah established her final firing position as shadows lengthened across the target area. She had 1 hour of usable light remaining, and the shot needed to be perfect on the first attempt. Miss or failure to engage would result in automatic disqualification regardless of her previous performance. The pressure of the moment crystallized everything she had learned during 16 weeks of intensive training. Technical skills, mental preparation, and psychological resilience would combine to determine whether she achieved her goal of graduating from the military's most demanding precision shooting program. The final target stood silhouetted against the darkening sky at a distance that pushed the absolute limits of her equipment and training. Sarah positioned herself behind her rifle, knowing that the next few minutes would determine not only her own future, but potentially influence military policy for generations of female soldiers who would follow in her footsteps. 950 meters separated her from success or failure. The target zone measured exactly 8 inches in diameter, requiring precision that would challenge Olympic marksmen under ideal conditions. Sarah faced this shot while exhausted from 20 hours of continuous operation, carrying the psychological pressure of everyone who doubted her capabilities. General Hayes stood in the observation bunker with Lieutenant Colonel Webb, both men watching through high-powered binoculars as Sarah prepared for her final engagement. The general's expression revealed nothing about his thoughts, but Webb noticed his commander's unusual tension as the moment of truth approached. "Sir, all other evaluations have concluded," Webb reported. "Martinez is the last shooter still on the course." Hayes nodded without taking his eyes off the distant figure. "What's her current score?" "Perfect performance on all 5 targets, sir. This final shot determines graduation." The weight of that statement settled between them like artillery smoke. Sarah's performance had exceeded every expectation, but military standards demanded consistent excellence rather than impressive improvement. Her final shot needed to meet the same precision requirements as her first, despite accumulated fatigue and mounting pressure. Sarah studied the target through her scope, noting how fading daylight affected visibility and contrast. The target appeared as a dark circle against lighter background material, but shadows created optical illusions that could influence aim point selection. She needed to account for these visual factors while maintaining focus on the fundamental marksmanship principles that had brought her this far. Wind conditions presented the greatest challenge for her final shot. Air movement at different elevations created complex patterns that changed constantly as temperature differences developed between ground level and higher altitudes. Sarah spent 30 minutes observing natural wind indicators, looking for consistent patterns that would allow accurate prediction of bullet drift. Her breathing technique became critical as exhaustion threatened to compromise the steady rhythm required for precision shooting. Sarah controlled her respiration carefully, using techniques developed during months of training to maintain consistent oxygen flow while preventing fatigue from affecting her shooting stance. The mathematics involved in her final shot required calculations more complex than any previous engagement. Distance, wind speed and direction, air temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and target angle all influenced bullet trajectory in ways that demanded precise measurement and mathematical analysis. Sarah made her calculations methodically, double-checking each variable to ensure accuracy. A single error in estimation would result in a miss that would end her chances of graduation. The pressure of this knowledge required mental discipline that went beyond technical shooting skills to include psychological resilience under extreme stress. Dr. Foster monitored Sarah's vital signs through concealed sensors, tracking heart rate and stress indicators that revealed her psychological state during the critical final moments. The data showed remarkable stability despite circumstances that typically caused significant anxiety in even experienced soldiers. Her stress markers are actually improving, Dr. Foster noted with amazement. Most shooters show elevated heart rates during final engagements. Martinez appears to be entering a zone of enhanced focus. Sergeant First Class Torres observed from a concealed position 200 meters from Sarah's location. His professional evaluation would become part of her permanent record, influencing future assignments and advancement opportunities throughout her military career. What he witnessed impressed him more than any previous student performance. "She's taking her time," Torres whispered into his radio. "Good discipline, no rushing despite time pressure." Sarah found her natural respiratory pause and began her final trigger squeeze. The pressure needed to be applied gradually and consistently, without disturbing her sight alignment or introducing movement that could affect accuracy. Her finger moved with practiced precision developed through thousands of training rounds. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the valley. Sarah maintained her shooting position, following through with her sight picture while the bullet traveled nearly 1,000 meters toward its distant target. The flight time seemed eternal as everyone waited for impact confirmation. General Hayes watched through his binoculars as the bullet struck the target zone with precision that stunned everyone present. The impact occurred exactly where Sarah had aimed, demonstrating accuracy that would have impressed professional marksmen operating under ideal conditions. She had achieved perfect performance while exhausted, under pressure, and facing the most challenging shot of her military career. "Perfect hit," Torres reported over the radio. "Dead center of the target zone." The observation bunker erupted in quiet exclamations of amazement as officers processed what they had witnessed. Sarah's final shot represented not just individual achievement, but validation of training methods and evaluation standards that applied equally to all soldiers regardless of background or gender. General Hayes lowered his binoculars and turned to face Lieutenant Colonel Webb. For the first time during the entire evaluation period, his expression revealed genuine admiration mixed with something that might have been surprise. "Webb, what was the final time?" Hayes asked. 22 hours and 15 minutes, sir. She finished under the time limit with 45 minutes to spare." Sarah remained in position for several minutes, processing the reality of what she had accomplished. 16 weeks of intensive training had culminated in perfect performance under the most challenging conditions the program could devise. She had proven her capabilities while meeting every standard applied to male soldiers throughout the program's history. Torres approached her position as Sarah secured her equipment for the final time as a student. His expression revealed professional respect that had been earned through demonstrated competence rather than granted as courtesy. "Congratulations, Martinez," Torres said simply. "Outstanding performance throughout the course." The walk back to the main compound took 30 minutes, giving Sarah time to reflect on everything she had experienced and accomplished. The physical exhaustion felt manageable compared to the emotional satisfaction of achieving goals that had seemed impossible just 4 months earlier. General Hayes waited in the briefing room as Sarah reported for final evaluation. The conversation that followed would determine not only her immediate assignment, but also establish precedents for future female candidates who might seek similar opportunities. "Sergeant Martinez, your performance exceeded all expectations," Hayes began. "You've demonstrated that individual capability matters more than preconceived assumptions about group characteristics." Sarah stood at attention, unsure how to respond to acknowledgement she had never expected to receive from the commanding officer, who had initially questioned her presence in the program. "Sir, I appreciate the opportunity to prove myself through performance rather than promises." Hayes nodded, understanding that her success challenged his own assumptions about military effectiveness and gender integration. "Your graduation will be noted by senior leadership throughout the armed forces. You've opened doors for other qualified women while maintaining the standards that make this program successful." The graduation ceremony took place the following morning, with Sarah receiving her sniper badge alongside 6 other soldiers who had survived the complete program. The 43% failure rate had claimed 8 candidates, but those who remained represented the military's newest generation of elite precision shooters. Major Patricia Collins attended the ceremony, watching with satisfaction as Sarah received recognition for achievements that validated years of advocacy for expanded opportunities for female soldiers. The success proved that capability rather than gender determined military effectiveness. As the ceremony concluded, Sarah understood that her achievement extended beyond personal satisfaction to include broader implications for military policy and social progress. Her success had proven that excellence transcended traditional assumptions about who belonged in elite military roles. General Hayes approached Sarah after the formal ceremony, offering a handshake that represented acknowledgement of mutual respect earned through demonstrated performance. "Martinez, I was wrong about your chances for success," Hayes admitted quietly. "Your performance proved that individual capability matters more than group assumptions. Thank you for teaching an old soldier that lesson." Sarah's impossible shot had not only earned her place among the military's elite, but also changed the perspective of a general whose opinions influenced policy throughout the armed forces. Her achievement would create opportunities for countless female soldiers who would follow her path toward excellence in roles previously considered beyond their capabilities.